may this be one of the best moments of your life. You're listening to the BusinessMirror podcast for a broader look on business with Senior Editor Dennis Estopace.
I'm Dennis Estopace, and welcome to Tuesdays with Tito, a podcast to be anchored by Tito Valiente, one of the 100 honorees in the Centenary of Philippine Cinema and columnist for the BusinessMirror newspaper. Mr. Valiente will share with us one of the many pieces he wrote for his column titled Annotations, which is published every Friday in the op-ed section of the BusinessMirror. We hope you enjoy your Tuesday with Tito.
An Afternoon with Anita Linda. People say she took a break during the late 1960s and early 1970s. But if you look into her filmography, Anita Linda was in films opposite Fernando Poe Jr. and Joseph Estrada, to name just a few of her sterling list of leading men. Anita Linda was a star of the late 1940s and 1950s. That afternoon, as we began the interview for the project of the manunuri ng pelikulang Pilipino called Living Voices and Moving Images, funded by the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, it was a grace to see her able to recall those years, that splendid age when her magic began. The project aims to document the many actors, directors, and other individuals involved in filmmaking with the hope of capturing the Filipino-ness of Philippine cinema at its inception and during its early growth. Anita Linda was the second person scheduled for an interview that quiet Palm Sunday. Earlier on Saturday, Benny Santos, poet and academic, talked with Delia Razon. Anita Linda was my lovely, enchanting afternoon. What an afternoon! What grand memories! She was complaining of vertigo as we walked down the flight of stairs leading to the center of the studio. Two black sofas were huddled, flanked by potted plants. Agnes Mejia, special assistant to Gigi Alfonso, present chairman of Manunuri and director of the project, was on one side and I on the other. Anita Linda was gripping hard our hands that it wasn't clear who was holding on and who was struggling to move. By the time we settled in the sofa, she sounded tired. It was a short respite because after a sip from the bottled water, she looked at me with those light blue eyes, young and beautiful at 90 years old. She turned toward Gigi and asked where her camera was. I began with the classic question on how she was discovered. She was watching a stage play, and Lupito the comedian kept looking at her direction and tossing to her the jokes. The great Leopoldo Salcedo noticed the comedian and turned to the light man, "Lentehan mo nga yan," or put the spotlight on her. Anita Linda recalled how she was fond of wearing a red bandana then and felt she made quite a sight. Lamberto Avellana would make the formal offer, and Daisy Ontiveros would give to Alice Lake that name, Anita Linda. The name now means brilliant acting that borders always on the grand and the bravura. That name means longevity and professionalism. The name Anita Linda meant Filipino cinema history, and she remembered all that afternoon. The memories came flooding back, rushing out, threatening to overpower us both. But the forces of the universe are always sweet and gentle to artists. The year 1951 was a remarkable era for Anita Linda. She was Sisa in the film of the same name made by Gerardo de Leon. She would win the Maria Clara Award for Best Actress. It was the last time the award would be given. The next year, FAMAS took over the task of recognizing excellence in cinema. What made your Sisa extraordinary? I always wanted to ask her this question given how the role has become one of the most abused characters in stage plays, TV shows, and films. Beauty queens use, much to our embarrassment and glee, the mad scene where Sisa looks for her two children. For those who have seen the film, presently made accessible by curators and government film programmers, they know that the real deal is Anita Linda as Sisa. Anita Linda talked of one instruction given by De Leon. Luka-luka ka dito, pero ayoko ng luka-luka na pinagtatawanan. Ikaw ang luka-lukang kinaawaan. You are a mad woman here, but I do not like a mad woman that is laughed at or made fun of. I want a mad woman who is pitied. It was a simple instruction, but Anita Linda said that guided her in the interpretation of one of the most iconic characters in a Filipino novel. De Leon was into details. Anita Linda smiled as she recalled this trait of the great film director. Imprisoned by the authorities, Sisa, as played by Anita Linda, had one scene where she was sprawled, her legs prominent before the camera. De Leon would go up to her and hoist her skirt higher. When the director turned around, she would cover her legs again. Then the director would go back and raise the skirt again to display those gams. The fickle movie audience would forget about Anita Linda, the major star in the coming years. She would play character roles in films that were not considered significant. In 1974, Anita Linda appeared once more in what turned out to be a major role. The film was Tatlo Dalawa Isa. The director was Lino Broca, and the episode was Hello Soldier. The title, Anita Linda and I said in unison. Writers and your public all agreed you came back with a vengeance, I told her. Visibly elated, she put her hand on my arm. We talked about the tour de force role and the big performance she delivered. The story is about a woman whose daughter was waiting for the visit of her father, an American serviceman. Anita Linda played the woman who gave birth to an Amerasian whose father was this American GI. The daughter was dreaming the huge American dream, that of living for the U.S. and living a happy, rich life. Two memorable scenes come to mind, I reminded Anita Linda. The first is when she comes out of a room very drunk and, initially sweetly, shyly, approaches the man who fathered her child. The soft sensuality soon gives way to violence as she starts to hit the American in front of her. The other scene is when she wakes up to a very quiet house. She's no longer drunk. Did her daughter leave her? At this point, Anita Linda began talking about how Lino Broca instructed her what would happen. She would go out of the house and she would look at the camera. She then shows a mixture of shock, fear, happiness, relief, and joy, while her throat gurgles with laughter, because at the other end is her daughter, played by an ethereal Hilda Coronel on the way home. As Anita Linda reenacted the scene, she brought her hands to her head as she cupped that face, now old, now young, bringing forth in seconds a jumble of emotions. I was in awe. I was starstruck. I told her I was starstruck, and once more she gently placed her hand on my arm. More memories came back. The war was on. The Japanese had confiscated the 10-hectare farm her father built for her mother and their many siblings. One day, the assistant director of Avellana came to ask her to be a film actress. She turned to her father and introduced properly the visitor. "What should I say, Papa?" She remembered her father telling her, "Go, Alice, we need the money." In a sense, Alice Lake did it for the money. In the end, we got Anita Linda, an actress in the grand tradition of Filipino cinema, who lived in an era when actresses were chaperoned, dressed, and made to pose in certain ways because there were no managers then, only a public that believed in the illusion of cinema. Anita Linda, like many other great actors, went further and took on the realities of the world and bore them with her in front of the camera in the style that was both wondrous and wild, and reckless and charming, all at the same time.
Thank you for listening to the Business Mirror podcast. For a broader look on business, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Business Mirror. Until next time.